Tonight we're going to be in Psalms 139. I think there's probably going to do a couple more. I've kind of been looking over a lot of what's left, and I think there's two in particular I want to get to, and I think that'll be the last two that we do. But Psalms 139, I think, is it's a great psalm because David, he comes to, I don't want to say he comes to a realization, but he talks about the wonderment of God, some things that he talks about that he views that we should view ourselves that I think is very interesting when it comes to who God is. We're going to begin by reading the first 6 verses. It says, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thoughts afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. For there's not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before, laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. So here, the first few verses especially, David talks about the knowledge of God and the presence of God. He's all-knowing, He's all-present, He's everywhere. And there's some things here that David says. He says, you've searched me and known me. And I think this is interesting the way he phrases this. If you contrast this with, I almost said the pagan gods of David's time, but actually the pagans of before David, during David, and after David, their gods were more, I guess, contrary, not too concerned with human beings, not too concerned with what they were doing, more of a tyrant, so to speak. And David here says, you have searched me and known me. So as he gets in talking about this, it's not that God just knows everything. David is making it more personal. You know everything about me. It's not that God is everywhere. He's saying God is everywhere He is. You know, he's making this personal. Now think about this when he is saying that you know my setting down, my rising up, and understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path, my lying down. You're acquainted with all my ways. There's not a word on my tongue that you don't know. Now think about that. We live in a world that you can't go anywhere there's not cameras, can you? I mean, there's always someone watching you. You know, I wonder sometimes because I used to get on my phone and there'd be ads of everything that you would say, and I've tested that several times. It's about made me where I'm going to start wearing a tinfoil hat because they're listening everywhere. Don't think they're not. They're watching, they're listening, So, and how does that make you feel? How does it make you feel know everybody that they're watching every move that you make? You feel important? Who said that? Do you say that, Bill? Feel important? I don't know if that makes me feel important or not. It kind of makes me feel a little violated, I guess, of watching it. But think about it. They're watching you. It gives you this feeling. Now, David is saying that God is doing that. God knows everything we're doing, everything we're saying. Now, depending on our relationship with Him is going to depend on how we feel about that, isn't it? I can either be afraid of that, I can resent that, I can try to run from that, or that can bring me comfort to know that no matter where I'm at, God knows. No matter what I'm doing, God knows. So depending on my relationship with God is going to depend on how I view Him being all-knowing and all-present, isn't it? Now, David here, he says, this is things that's too wonderful for my knowledge. It's high. He said, I can't attain it. He looks at it as wonderment. So I think it brings comfort to him to know that no matter where he's at, God knows everything that He's doing. And that should bring us comfort, and we should feel important for that. And that's why David said, you've searched me and known me. David is saying, I am so important to you, God. This is how close you are to me. You want to know everything I'm doing. It's not that He's waiting there just to strike us when we say a bad word or we do something wrong or we think something wrong. David's not looking at it like that. He's looking at it as, God, you're everywhere I am. You've searched me and you know me. I'm important to you. It's not that you're just everywhere. You're everywhere with me. It's not that you're all-knowing. You know everything about me. It's personal to him. It's something that he realized, I'm your creation, and I'm important to you, God. And this is, and your ability to do that is just too wonderful for me to understand. Now, here's one thing I guess sometimes I don't think about. When I think about God being all-knowing and everywhere, sometimes I don't think about the thought part of it. God not only knows what we're doing, He knows the thought behind what we're doing. He not only knows what we're saying, He knows the thought behind what we're saying. And that could be either good or bad, isn't it? There's things that maybe I do out of ignorance. And my thought process is, I may be thinking I'm doing right, but it may be out of ignorance. God knows that. It's not an excuse, but God knows that. It may be just outright rebellion. And then God knows my thought process with that, and He knows that. So that in itself can bring us comfort. But it can be kind of scary also, can't it? It really depends on our relationship with God. And as David goes on and even describes more, as we're going to get into Psalm, there's even if we wanted to, there's nowhere we can run from that, is there? Jesus said in Matthew 10, and the verse is slipping me, that every hair on our head is numbered. Matthew 10, I think it's about verse 29 or 30, something like that, I think. You think about that, that seems like something that doesn't make sense. That seems something like useless information, doesn't it? Why would God need to know every hair on my head? Well, it's not that He has to know, it's that He wants to know everything about us, and He does know everything about us. Nothing is new to God. He knows everything before, everything after, He knows everything during. And so if we have that knowledge, put that knowledge with He has that specifically for me and specifically for you. So again, depending on our relationship with God is how we're going to treat that knowledge that we have of that. David is saying, okay, I don't understand. It's too wonderful for me to understand. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's high. I can't attain that. But what David does attain is that it brings him comfort that God can do that. We could rack our brains on how God does it. Where does God begin? Where does His knowledge begin? Where does His, we can have debates. We can think of all these things that there's no way for us to figure out. His thoughts are above our thoughts. And David said, I can't obtain that. But I like how he starts out here, and I think it sets the tone for what he's thinking and how he's approaching this. O Lord, you search me and know me. So this is personal to David. He says, you know my setting downs. You know, and you have hedged me behind and before. So you think David is thinking about every time he was faced with death? Every time he was faced with somebody trying to come after him or something happened? How did David view that? You've hedged me behind and before. You've laid your hand upon me. He said, because of the knowledge that you have, because that you're all knowledgeable, because that you're all present, that you're all knowledgeable and present about me, then you know when I'm in trouble. When I cry out to you, you hear it, you know it because you're with me. And you've laid your hand upon me. You put a hedge. I've got through this, not because of my own abilities, because you put a hedge in front of me and behind me. You're the one guiding me. It almost kind of reminds me of when God was leading them out of Egypt. How did they know where to go? How did they know God was with them? You remember? The cloud, the fire. God made His presence known, didn't He? He made sure they know that, okay, I'm with you in this. I'm guiding you in this. And David, I think that's exactly what he's saying. Now, today, Does He still do the same thing today? Or do we say, well, that's just in the past. He did that for David, or He did that for them. Does God do the same thing for us today? Is He still all-knowing? Is He still all-present? So He knows these things. Again, I wanted to do this psalm as we did Psalms 130, because Psalms 130, it really struck a chord with me, because it really made us think about, of all the things we know about the nature of God, it comes down to His mercy, His redemptive power, His forgiveness. If we're willing to seek that's what He's about. That's what He wants. And David kind of, I think, continues this here when he says, here's what you've done for me. Here's what I'm able to know about you. There's a lot that I'm not able to know, too wonderful for me. But here's what I'm able to know about you. One, I can't run from you. I can't hide from you. And three, I don't want to do that. Because you're there anyway. So, and that brings me comfort. So in the darkest cave when he was running and hiding from Saul, God was there with him. In those darkest times when everyone was after him, he knew God was there with him. Just like he said when he was able to fight Goliath, the same God that helped me with the bear, the same God that helped me with the lion, same God's going to help me with Goliath. He understood that God had His best interest in mind. And I think that's what David kept going on. And I think the more I've read through the Psalms and studied them as we're going through this, I've often wondered what made David a man after God's own heart. And when we hear stories of him not doing the right thing when he's taking the ark, and what happened to Uzzah, you hear about Bathsheba, you hear all these kind of things, and you think, well, he was just human and he still sinned. Well, that couldn't make him a man after God's own heart. I think it was what he kept coming back to when he realized this, when he was confronted with the sin that he had, when he was confronted about the things in which he did, when Nathan came to him and basically, you're the man. You did this, and David, you're right, I've sinned. He was able to admit that. He was able to understand that. He was able to come back to that. I think it's because of his knowledge and what he understood about the character of God, of what God wanted. It wasn't excusing his actions by any means, because he suffered consequences for things that he did. But David knew what God wanted from him, and that how important he was to God. And I think if we really think of it in those terms, it ought to change the way we live our lives. It ought to. It should be said of all of us that we're people after God's own heart. That's what David is going for. He's showing this is how God cares. He's going for his heart here. Yeah, you've got all these wonderful abilities. David said, I don't see him as you using them as a tyrant, ready to pounce on me and watch me. Oh yeah, you're keeping score here. Remember, that's what we talked about in Psalms 130, when it says, if you kept an account of all this, who could stand? So if God was sitting there with a pencil and paper and writing every little single thing down, no one can stand, because there's none righteous, no, not one. David knew that of himself. But he's understanding the character of God, of what God expects, what God wants. And David is coming at it not from a fear of just wrath that God has. It's, I want to serve you because of the love that you have for me and the care that you have, because you search me out and know me. And I think that's a wonderful way to start this psalm here. Any thoughts on these 6 verses before we move on? Let's look at 7 through 12. He says, where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost part of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. So he continues here for a little bit, and he's basically saying, where could I go anyway? Where can I go from your Spirit? Where can I go that you're not there? And he's talking about everywhere he could possibly go. I could go to Shiloh. I could go to heaven. I could go from this end of the earth. I could go from this end of the earth. I could be in the darkest places, but your light is still going to shine. There's not anywhere that I can go that you're not there. And I don't think David, or it don't seem to me, that David is saying this, God, I just can't go anywhere you're not there. Can't I get away from you just for a minute? Can't I just, get over here where that you're not there? I don't think he's saying it like that. I'm thinking he's saying, where could I, even in my darkest time, you're there. Your light is shining even in that darkest place. And isn't that what we need? Isn't that where sometimes we see God the most, is in our darkest place? He says here, if I go down, even the night shall be the light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you. But the night shines as the day. The darkness and light are both alike to you. Sometimes we feel like we're so deep and so far gone that God can't reach us. Now I think we can harden our heart to where we walk away and don't let God do it. But there's sometimes I think that we can feel like, I don't know if you've ever felt like that, there's times I think I've come close to feeling like that. I'm just in such a dark place, I don't know if He can see me. I don't know if He's there. I don't know if He's, I almost feel like Job sometimes in the first part when he said, I go forward and I don't see you, I go backwards and can't see you. I go to the side or go to the left or to the right and I can't feel your presence. You think about all that Job went through in that particular moment, that could have been the hardest. You don't see God in any of this. You don't see where God's at with the struggle. It may be you just lost a loved one. God, that's a dark place. Where are you in this? You just lost your job. God, this is a dark place. Where are you at in this? Something has happened, something that's, just feels tragic to you. And we may not feel His presence. But we need to go on, as Job says, as he says there. I think it's Job, 23, I think, when he says, but you know my every step, and I'll trust in your word like my necessary food. I think this is kind of what David is saying. I can't go anywhere, God, that you're not. Even in my darkest place, you're there. You're the light that I need, no matter where I'm going. And notice what he says, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. It's almost like, someone, how somebody can go and, got their hand on you and pointing the way here. Come this way. This is the way you need to go. It's almost like that's what David is saying. God's got His arm around him here, and then He's leading him here. And that's exactly what he needs at that dark time. He needs somebody to show him the way out. And God's the only one that can in times. But sometimes we don't look for that hand. Sometimes we don't. We just close our eyes and we just think we're in that dark place. I mean, think about it. Isn't that why Jesus come to start with? Didn't He say the world's in darkness? I come to bring the light. You are condemned already. I came to seek and save that which is lost. You're condemned already. I didn't come to condemn. I come to save. You were in darkness. I brought the light. No one was showing you the way. You didn't know the way. Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes unto the Father except through me. So He's showing that light. And David is saying this about God here. That's what you're doing for me. I can't run from you anywhere. Where could I go that your Spirit is not there? There's nowhere I can go. You know why? Because He created everything. There's nowhere that's why in Revelation it talks about, the end of time they'll run to the mountains and say to the mountains, fall on me. Won't do any good. That won't stop God. I mean, didn't Jonah try to run? How did that work out for him? We can't run from God. And I think that's what David is not saying, that he's wanting to run from God. He's just saying, where could I go anyway? And if we come to that knowledge, think about it. If we really come to the knowledge of God's everywhere I am, He knows everything I'm doing, He knows everything I'm saying, He knows everything that I'm thinking. And I think it comes down to that crucial moment. How does that make me feel? If it makes me ashamed, if it makes me afraid, if it makes me leery, if it makes me want to rebel, then maybe I need to look at my relationship with God or look at how I'm living my life. But if it brings me comfort, if it brings me a sense of okay, if all else fails, I've still got God, then, I think it says a lot about us as Christians of understanding our relationship of being His children. And I think that's what David here is doing. But he's just saying, I can go everywhere, but you've created it anyway, so you're going to be there. And I think that's a pretty good epiphany, as it were, to finally come to that understanding maybe that we need to, that David does have. Any thoughts of this before we move on?
David fought the lion and the bear. He fought Goliath. He fought how many wars. There were people all around him who wanted to kill him, including his son.
Yeah.
But he survived. If he hadn't been a man after God's heart, would he have lived as long as he did?
I don't see how he could have. I don't know.
I don't know how many times the Lord snatched him out of the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why I believe he was comforted. Because he knew the Lord took care of it. He may not knew how, but he knew he was.
Yeah.
But the same thing would be true for all of us.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been for being close to the Lord, where would we be today?
And I think you hit a point there, as David said in the beginning. It's too wonderful. He may not understood how God did it, but he knows He did. And I think sometimes, and I'm speaking for myself and maybe for others, sometimes I think we get hung up on the how. How is God going to answer my prayer? How is He going to do this? How did He help me in this way? Instead of He just will or He just did, And I think that's why Ephesians 3:20 is still one of my favorite verses, that God can do far abundantly more for us than we could ask or think, according to the power that's in us. I may have a way of thinking this is how God will do this or should do this. You pray, God, help me through this and let me give you a blueprint of how I want you to do it. I think that's sometimes our prayers can be. And God is like, I can show you something way more than that. I can give you something that you don't even know you need to ask for. It's far above us. So I guess it comes down to what I always try to tell myself over and over is, God's able to do it. I don't have to understand how He does it. I don't have to get caught in the hows. I just need to know He's able to. And as long as I've got faith that He's able to, what else do I really need? That's what I need to know. He's able to do it. He loves me. He's got my best in. Isn't that what He really did for Job? I mean, He didn't really answer Job the way Job wanted Him to answer him. He gave him a whole list. Where were you when I created the moon? Where were you when I created the stars? Where were you when I made the oceans and I made its waves stop here and I stretched a string across it? Where were you? He gave all of these things, and what did Job say? These are too wonderful for me. I don't know. I don't know how you did it. And God is saying, that's the point. You don't. You don't have to. But what you need to know is, I have your best interest in mind. And that's all we really need to know. As a little kid, isn't that what we're asking our children as they're little and growing? Isn't that how we get them to trust us? Do you think they know everything about how we do everything? How we feed them, how we help them, how we kept them from falling off a chair, how we did. They may not even see us do that, but they know we did. They know we're there to help. They may not understand how Mom and Daddy does that, but as they grow and learn more and more, they'll start seeing more and more as they experience it themselves and as they learn more themselves. But to start with, it's just a trust thing, isn't it? That's really what it always boils down to is, do you know that you can trust me, that I have your best interest? Yeah. And then the rest, it really doesn't matter. All that matters is they know you love them and that you have the very best for them. And even part of that is chastisement, part of that is punishment, part of that is reward. It encompasses it all that makes up that trust and that love. You know, and it's reciprocal of things. And I think that's what John was saying. That's what made David a man after God's own heart. All this that he's been through, he's seen God in this, you know. You know, that's what I always liked about him getting ready to fight Goliath when he was talking to him. He didn't say, when I fought the bear, I was able to overcome it. When I fought the lion, I was able to overcome it. And look what I did. And look, you know, it was, you know, when I had to go get the sheep from the bear, I had to go get sheep from the lion. The same God that did that, he's still the same God that's here that's going to do this. And that's what we have to do. When we face each and every day, we face it knowing the same God who was here yesterday is the same God that's going to be here today doing the same thing. It's like that one lady told that, you've heard me say before, told that lady in the hospital when the doctor said, you know, you just pray, that's all you can do. And that lady that was getting the trash come by and put her hand on the lady's shoulder and said, don't worry, honey, God don't take off on Tuesday. You know, I still think about that in my mind is God don't take off on Tuesday. You know, which she meant he's still the same God. And I think that's something we could really live by and think about. Any other thoughts? Did you have something? Was you raising your hand too at the same time, or did you say it? You know, what he said was better than what you had anyway? Okay. I get that a lot. Start in verse 13. For you formed my inner parts, you covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you. When I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth, your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed. In your book they are all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. For you formed my inward parts. The God of all knowledge and constant present had the care and concern to personally form the child in his mother's womb. And I was thinking about this in particular. You think about all the technology we got today. What is it now? 4D images of a kid in the stomach. You know, it looks like they're pressed up against a window, you know. But you can see it, you know, as it's being formed. David couldn't see that, could he? He's talking about in the hidden places and in the secret parts, in the lowest part of the earth. He said, you saw the substance being yet unformed. He's even noticing and understanding God's greatness on understanding childbirth from the mother's womb. You know, all of a sudden, there it is. We don't know how you form all of that, how it gets it exactly right. We don't know how you start thinking about the limited knowledge that David had that we've got today, that we could see a lot of things and we still don't understand. I don't. You know, we still don't know and see how God perfectly makes all of this. But he's acknowledging this. For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. He said, God, you did this. Not only do you know me, you formed me. From the very beginning you were with me. In the innermost parts you were with me. It wasn't that David just realized, oh God, now you're just starting to be with me here when I'm grown up and doing this. You've always been with me. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. You created me. So why wouldn't you know everything about me? Why wouldn't you take an interest in me? You made me, you know. To me, this is just so personal to David. He's realizing God, you know, as great as God is, of all the universe that He made and how wonderful it is, Look how wonderful mankind is, and God formed it in His own image. And David said, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. That's a wonderful thing. And he says, nothing is hidden from you from the very beginning. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed. And in your book there all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. God, you've seen me to the end before the beginning ever started. That's how wonderful you are. That's how magnificent you are. You know my end before I was even formed. You don't get much more powerful than that, do you? I think David, in whatever words he can find, whatever words we can find when we try to describe how great God is, I think that's about the best we can do, isn't it? That's you're so great, you know the beginning from the end. You know me before I even know me. And that's the thing. We can't fool God. We may not like what He says about us in His Word. There may be something that He says in His Word that strikes a chord with us, and I don't agree with that. I'm not like that. I'm not like it. Well, if God says we are, we are. He knows me better than I know me. So I need to listen to Him. He's the one formed me, so He knows exactly who I am. He knows exactly what I'm thinking. He knows exactly these things, so I need to trust Him when He says, this is how you need to live, and if you live contrary to this, well, no, I'm not. I'm doing this, this, and this, and I'm doing okay. And God is saying, no, you're not doing okay. I want you to do better, and you're capable of doing better. Well, no, I'm not. You just don't understand. I mean, sometimes we're like Moses. God, you don't understand. I can't speak well. I can't, my speech is not what it should. I can't do what I should. God, I'm not the man for the job. I don't know why you're asking me to do this or telling me to do this. Don't you realize, that I'm this, this, and this, and this? Remember what God said? Yeah, I know. I made you. Of course I know what you're able to do. You may not think you're able to do it, but you don't know yourself as well as I know you. So here's what you're going to do. So think about it this way. When we get hesitant, because I'll be first to tell you, I'm a pretty anxious person. I'm a pretty, worrier, and I get apprehensive about a lot of things. I put on a good front sometimes, but I'm apprehensive a lot. And, I think about, God, am I really able to do this, or am I really able to do this? If He says that I am, if I'm studying, God, you're able to do this, Ronald, you're able to walk this way, you're able to overcome this, then I am. The only reason I wouldn't, because I try to convince myself that I'm not. God has already told me that I can. So do I either believe Him, or do I justify myself? Do I believe Him, or do I listen to Satan's over here that's telling me that I can't do it? God only wants this or wants this. God tells me exactly the truth because He knows me. He knows me better than anybody else. And that should be pretty comforting. And that's starting as I get a little older and I start realizing some things. That brings me more comfort than it used to. It used to not bring me as much comfort. Now it's starting to bring me a lot more comfort. It gives you that sense of, you start thinking about, as David, you start wanting to know the character of God and starting to wanting to, it's one thing to want to know His Word, but it's another thing to study His Word to want to know Him. And at some point, I think we've got to get to that point. There's something about, reading, memorizing Scripture, and knowing the Word. I knew a man who claimed to be an atheist, thought the Bible was the greatest mythical book ever written, and I believe the man could quote the whole Bible. Anytime I was ever around him, he quoted Scripture after Scripture after Scripture. He knew the Word, but he didn't know God. And there's times, I think sometimes we know His Word, we just don't know Him, and I think that's why we don't follow His Word like we should, because we're not trying to know Him. And that's what we need to start trying to know. Just as we talked about in the previous psalm, the psalmist wasn't thanking God for the gifts of His forgiveness, the gifts of His mercy and His love. He was thinking about the one who gives forgiveness, the one who gives love, the one who gives mercy. And you start thinking about the one who does that, you start appreciating what He gives a little more. And I think that's what David is doing, is talking about what God's able to do but more on who he is himself. Any other thoughts as we move on? We may get through this.
God knows your inward parts before you were formed, and you're fearfully and wonderfully made. And He knows and saw you before you were yet unformed. How bad is the day of abortion?
Well, there was some things I actually wrote down on the abortion side of it, but I didn't know if we had time. You think about that. You think about what God has in store and has formulated before He formed us, and then man kills it. I'd hate to give an answer for that. It is. Yeah, but you think about other things, though, Mike. You think about things God knows that and has a path for me. Now, there's a difference, and I'm not knowledgeable enough to get into all of this technically, I guess, but on a lot of things. And I think this is where some get confused. There's a difference in predestination and God's foreknowledge. There's one thing some thinking He's predestined me, there's nothing I can do to change it. That's different than God, I think I'm saying it right, that's different than God knowing it. The plan is predestined, but I still have free will within that. But the same token of abortion, of killing off what God is before, even when God formed it and the plan He has for it, what about something God has in store for me and I refuse to do what He says to do and I cut it off? I may not receive the blessings that He had for me. Somebody else may not receive the blessing that He had stored for them based on what I was going to be doing, and I cut it off and didn't do it because I didn't want to or didn't think I could. We could take that to a lot of different levels. Right. That, we stop short of what God says, this is what I want you to do. And it's more than just, I think it's more than just obeying Him. I think it's what obeying Him means to not only me, but maybe to those that are around that can benefit from it. And if I come short of obeying it, somebody else may suffer because of what I didn't do. And that's pretty scary to think about. Of what plan of God did I cut off because I refused to do it or I rebelled against Him? And I think abortion would rank at one of the top ones of that. Verse 17 and 18. How precious are your thoughts to me, O God! How great is the sum of them! If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. When I wake, I'm still with you. I like that. When I wake, I'm still with you. When I wake up, you're still there. You're there. That first thing in the morning, that's going to bring me comfort because you're still there. And how great are the thoughts that you have for me. Let's just go on through here on the last, Ben. It says, oh, that you would slay the wicked. Now he changes here and he goes to a prayer of, okay, since I know how wonderful you are, there's still those out there that are wicked. Oh, that you would slay the wicked. Oh, God, depart from me. Therefore, you bloodthirsty men, for they speak against you wickedly. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate them, O Lord, who hate you? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them my enemies. David, I think, is just saying, here's how wonderful I know you are. I can't believe people would act this way against you and do these things against you. I hate them like you hate them. I'm against them like you would be against them. And let's finish up the last two. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties. And see if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Based on God's knowledge of David and David's knowledge of what God has of him, he said, search my ways to see that I'm not living the way that I should. And he trusts God to do that.